This Java program creates a bilingual or English and French mental health support chatbot for refugees. It runs a simple GUI user interface using Swing, allowing users to send text messages and receive helpful responses. The chatbot recognizes keywords related to stress, anxiety, or emergencies and replies with relevant coping tips or emergency resources. It provides country and city based mental health support links and detects high risk phrases to display crisis hotlines. The file is titled Paul's CPT Part 2 Final Product Showcase. All right, so let's begin with the overall look and readability of my program. You'll notice that just after the main class is introduced, that there's a exact four-space indent for each of the lines. This is just to ensure that there's an overall use of blank lines and empty spaces. You'll see that these chunks of code here have a similar function of just declaring objects and variables. So I chunked them together. This is just to make sure my code is much easier to read and cleaner overall. I also added comments all over, as you'll see subheadings and comments. So you'll see the IPO model starting with input, input, and then as I go down, you'll see that it goes to process, and then output would be next. This is just to follow the IPO headers logic. For the Java class, you'll notice that it's going to be main, just to follow the main.java, the file name. And then for all these classes you'll see here, there's a huge variety. You'll notice the first one is going to be the Swing library, which provides GUI components for creating desktop applications. And then the second one over here, the abstract window toolkit, provides basic GUI functionality. And then down here, the event one, you notice that it's for event handling for user interactions. And then down here, the .io, it'll be for input and output operations for file handling. And then for the simple date format, that's just for date and time formatting. And the last one, it will be the wildcard for importing all utility classes and data structures. All right, then we have, as you see, the main class being main.java again, and then you'll see our main method introduced, and then just under we have that method that schedules a task to run on the event dispatch thread, which is Swing's dedicated thread for handling all GUI operations and user interactions. All right, so moving down, we have the first input section where we're just declaring internal variables, as well as down here you can see that we're initializing some of them. So over here, you'll see these are private static final instance variables that declare three internal data structures: a nested hash map for storing mental health resources organized by country and city, and then a hash map for mapping keywords for coping tips and coping strategies, and then finally a hash set for storing emergency related keywords that trigger immediate crisis response. And then moving down, you'll see that this is a generating pseudo random numbers. So specifically for selecting varied chatbot responses from the arrays in the processed input method, that's going to be further down. It's just to make sure that the chatbot's not too repetitive and it's a bit personalized. And then a little further down, you'll see where we're starting to initialize the variables that we were declaring up at the top. So over here, Refugee support chatbot, that's just title that's going to appear when the chatbot is run, when the program is run. And then here, these are just the sizes of the input and chat area. And then these two will be the buttons that will be available for the user to be clicking. So if I were to run the program, you'll see that it's going to be at the bottom here. You'll see the text box where we're able to enter in our words, our keyboard input. Then you'll see the first button, send. Then you'll see the second button, français, or this will just be the language toggle for us to toggle between français and English, French and English. Then the reason I chose French as the second option is because I speak French. Oui, je parle français aussi. Alors, je vais utiliser deux langues. So I wanted to choose the two languages I could use, as well as they're both the national languages of Canada. So down here, moving down, this just prevents the user from being able to typing directly into the chat display area. So as you can see, I can't type here. And this just makes sure, this second over here, just make sure that if there's a long message, they won't extend horizontally beyond the visible area. So requiring an horizontal scrolling wheel. So if this goes all the way over here, it's not gonna need a scrolling wheel, it's gonna just gonna cut itself and come down. And this line over here helps with that because this just makes sure that the line wrapping happens for the word isn't split in the middle, but a whole word, sorry, is moved. So for example, if I did this, you can see that today is now down here because there's not enough room, and because of this function, set wrap style word, it's not cutting today in the middle, for example. Instead, it's moving the entire word together. It's moving the entire word together. So moving down here, you see this J panel. So this is just a container object that uses the add method to group these three GUI components. So it's just going to be adding a text field, a send button, a language button into a single layout panel. So, and then moving down here, you'll see this is just the original size of the chatbot. You'll notice now that it's now, as I expanded it with this, it's now just going to connect. It's going to adjust to the interactive terminal. No matter like if I move it left or right, if I move it here, it's just going to adjust. But this 450 by 400 pixels, that would be the original value, which was just a small box, which you'll see again. And then here is just making sure that my chat box is visible using a Boolean constant, or we could say a Boolean literal. So moving down here, you'll see another input section. This method over here is just a private instance that populates three data structures with predefined data using key value pairs. So the method creates nested hash maps where local hash map variables, so you'll see the Canada, the US, the France, in the short sums of FR, US, and CA, to store city to source mappings. And these are then added to a class level resource. This hash map using country names as keys. And for the coping tips, you'll see over here, these hash maps maps mental health keywords to advice strings. So it's adding the keywords to the advice strings like sleep to avoid screens before bed and maintain a regular schedule. So lastly, you'll notice that these are emergency keywords set, and it stores crisis related terms in both English and French. So you can see this if I were to type the word stress. You'll see that it'll tell me to breathe in deeply for 4 seconds, hold for 4 seconds, and exhale for 4 seconds, and then repeat 3 times. So this is just the advice that's stringed attached with the keyword of stress. You can see that right over here. And then if I were to type in resources, it's going to ask me, it's going to now prompt me to enter in my country. So if I were to put Canada, and I said, for my city, I said Vancouver, it's now going to present me with a crisis center, the number I can call, as well as the website URL. You can see that over here, just over here. And then, lastly, if I were to do an emergency keyword, so for example, if I said harm, it would now say, if you are thinking about harming yourself, please call emergency services at 1-800-273-8255. So just a number I found while doing my research in order to connect the user to the specific emergency crisis hotline. And then, so for the last input section, you'll see that the program, this is what immediately pops up. You'll see, bonjour, comment puis-je vous aider aujourd'hui? Or, hello, can I assist you today? Which is, you can see at the top over here. This is what pops up immediately as the program is run. So the method greet user implements conditional string assignment to display localized greeting messages. It uses the Boolean variable is French as the condition, so it would be either bonjour, comment puis-je vous aider aujourd'hui, the French version, or the English version that you could see at the top. And then this /n here is just going to create a new line and calls on append method on the chat area to display it. So to display in the chat area, just creating a new line. So down here you'll see the what's it called? The toggle language. So this is using a logical not operator to invert a Boolean variable is French. Once again, is French both over here. As you see the exclamation mark right over there, that's creating the not operator. It's going to apply a conditional logic to update the GUI button from French to English, and then append a confirmation message that the language has changed. So if you see I click French or Français, it's now going to say langue changée en français, or language is now changed to French or in French. And you'll see that it's now changed. And you can also see now that English is now here instead of what was French. Now if I switch back, it's going to say language switch to English, and now this is going to go back to Francais or French, so that the user can still go back and forth. So moving down to the first process of my program, we begin with a method called process input. This performs an input validation and error checking by retrieving text from the get text method. You'll see the get text method, and applying string manipulation with the trim method. That's just gonna make sure that it removes any unnecessary white space, and then using conditional logic, the if statement, to check for empty input and displaying a localized error message before executing an early return statement to exit the method if the validation fails. So if I were to type in nothing and I were to click send, for example, it's going to say please enter a message. And if I was in French and I said send, it's going to say veuillez entrer un message. So it's going to keep asking me to enter a message because there's nothing there. And with this process, it's going to make sure that the program knows that there's nothing there. So this is a similar section moving down, but instead of looking for empty text, we're looking for emergency keywords. So like suicide or 2A, using the conditional if statement once again. So for example, if I were to say help or harm, let's say if I did harm, it's gonna say, oh, sorry, we're still in the French. So if I were to say, if I was going English version, I were to say harm again, it's going to tell me, if you're thinking about harming yourself, please call emergency services at 1-800-273, etc., etc. And then if I were to switch and I were to say aider, so if I were in French and I were to say aider, which is help in French or in certain verb tense, it will then give me the French version. Si vous avez fait de mal, veuillez appeler immédiatement les services d'urgence, and it will give the number. So it's the same thing, just in French. And now you see, I'll now switch back to English. So this conditional control structure, using a if and else if statements, implements a string comparison. With equals ignore case method to ignore uppercase and lowercase, and then it will then execute different methods. It would call it different method calls or nested iteration loops based on the match condition. So if I typed resources, so with an uppercase R, if I were to type resources, and it would then ask me to enter my country. So I said Paris. France. I said Paris. You'll see that's what's happening that's with this function. It's going to show resources. That's what's happening with that. And then if I were to type summary, which will be explained in another process down below, if I said summary, it's going to give me a mood summary. It's going to be a mood log. So this is the prototype version for like what counselors or like supporters we could use for like analysis. And then just the line down here, you'll see that it's just a separator with a new line with a new line over here /n, in order just the chatbot to look just to look a bit cleaner. And this line checks if the user's input converted to lowercase exists in the key you see here, the coping tips, so if it just exists in the coping tips map, and if the if condition in the previous line is true, so just above, if it's true, then this line gets executed and appended to the chat area. So if I were to say something like lonely, there you go, this conditional statement is what's at work. So however, if the user's input does not match any specific conditions, so you'll see here, if it's not matching anything, here we go. If it's not matching any of these resources, summary, all resources, if it doesn't match these words, even with the equals ignore case, so the uppercase or lowercase, it's gonna use the else box, provides a default or generic randomized line. So you'll see with this else block, so if I were to say anything else, if I were to say, let's say like happy, it's going to say, I'm doing my best to support you. Or if I said something again, if I said LOL, you see it's going to do another one. It sounds like you're going through a lot. This is just giving through different situations. And if I did one more time, I said, hey, it would say, I understand how you feel. So it's just rotating through again and again and again. And the same thing if I were to do in French. And if I were to type something in French, I say, if I were to do vert, color green, it's going to see je comprends ce que vous ressentez. So I understand how you feel. So once again, it's just saying the same thing in French and English. And using the Boolean variable, it checks if it's French is selected or not. So if it's just false or true. And this line, right over here, declares a method. So it's going to be show resources. It's private, meaning it can only be called from the main class, and void indicates that the method cannot return any value. So yeah. And then you'll see these two lines over here before I move down. You'll see that these two lines, this is just going to make sure it's random. These are getting randomized. And then here's the Boolean value that's making sure it's, what's it called, French or English. And then moving down, once I said again, this private void is now going to make sure that it doesn't return any value. And it's going to, this line is going to use to create the dialog boxes. So you'll see if I were to type resources again. That's what's being at work here. This country, and along with the city. So if I was to say Canada again. Now this second one over here, string city. This second line is now going to ask me, and if I were to say Vancouver again, that's what's at work here. However, if it's not, so you see if the country, if it's null. This condition operator checks to see if the country and city is valid, or if it's invalid, and immediately returning and stopping resource retrieval and displaying an error message. So if I were to do this again, if I said resources, and let's say I said lol, it's gonna, and I did this, no resources found for this location. So those locations aren't in the system, so that means it's gonna give me this error message, and I have to do it again in order to find some resources that actually match the certain country. So this last additional process, in summary, the display mood method, it just provides a way to analyze and present the user's mood history from a log file, offering a helpful overview of their emotional trends. It then handles potential errors such as like the file not being found, and provides localized messages based on the user's preferred language. So this is like a prototype example for an effective tool for workers like counselors or let's say immigration officers. So you notice that a scanner is used inside a try with resources block to safely read each line of the mood log file, and then each line is going to be split by commas, as you can see here. And if there's not enough data, the second value, or index 1, is considered the recorded mood. So the method updates the mood count using get or default, and increases the total. So if the file is not found, then it's gonna catch the file not found exception and tells the user in English or French that no mood history is available, and then also checks if no valid mood entries were found and gives another message in that case. So then finally, it prints out a summary using a loop through the hash map showing each mood and how many times it occurred percentage of time. So if I were to click summary, you can see just a list of resources like help me now, where you can see my responses. So this would be useful for a lot of workers. So starting over again, if I were to say, if I were to stop and start the program over again, how can I help you? How can I assist you today? Just say, hey, I need help. Thank you for listening. Well, it's just gonna keep guessing. If I selected French or Francais, I just said tuer. So this would just be kill. For example, if I said a sentence that contained that word, it's gonna give me a phone number I can call and switch back to English. And if I were to say resources, say so the wrong resources. There, it's asking me for my country. So if I were to do instead of Canada or US again, if I did USA, and I did my city, which would be New York, it's going to give me some refugee support as long with the website number. And once again, if I were to, for example, if I typed in something, if a user typed in something like this, kill myself, it would say, if you're thinking about harming yourself, please call emergency services at this number. So overall, this is my program, and thank you for listening.